దూర విద్యా విధానంలో డాక్టర్ బిఆర్ అంబేద్కర్ ఓపెన్ యూనివర్సిటీ దేశంలోనే మొట్టమొదటి సార్వత్రిక విశ్వవిద్యాలయం. దాదాపు 2.5 దశాబ్దాలుగా దూర విద్యా విధానం ద్వారా కంప్యూటర్ కోర్సును అనుసంధానం చేస్తూ బీఏ, బీకామ్, బీఎస్సీ డిగ్రీ కోర్సులను అందిస్తోంది. పోస్ట్ గ్రాడ్యుయేషన్ స్థాయి, డిగ్రీ, డిప్లొమా స్థాయి కోర్సులను ఔత్సాహికులైన విద్యార్థులకు అందిస్తోంది. డెవలప్మెంట్ స్టడీస్లో సెంటర్ ఫర్ ఎకనామిక్స్ అండ్ సోషల్ స్టడీస్ ద్వారా ఎంఫిల్, పీహెచ్డీతో పాటు విశ్వవిద్యాలయమే స్వయంగా దూర విద్యా విధాన అంశంపైన పీహెచ్డీ వంటి పరిశోధన కోర్సులు ప్రవేశపెట్టింది. సుమారు 4.5 లక్షల మంది విద్యార్థులు ఈ విశ్వవిద్యాలయం నుంచి ఉన్నత విద్యావకాశాలు పొందుతున్నారు. డాక్టర్ బిఆర్ అంబేద్కర్ సార్వత్రిక విశ్వవిద్యాలయం స్థానికంగా స్వయం బోధనా పద్ధతిలో ముద్రణ రూపంలో రూపొందించిన కోర్స్ మెటీరియల్ అందిస్తోంది. కోర్స్ మెటీరియల్ అధ్యయనానికి సహకరించే విధంగా రేడియో, టెలివిజన్ పాఠ్యాంశాల ఆధారంగా కార్యక్రమాలు ప్రసారం చేస్తోంది. అధ్యయన కేంద్రాల ద్వారా ఏర్పాటు చేసే సలహా సంసర్గ తరగతులు, సైన్స్ ప్రాక్టికల్ సౌకర్యాలు విద్యార్థులకు స్వయం అధ్యయనానికి ఒక చక్కటి అవకాశం. ఇవి విద్యార్థి సమీపంలో ఉండే అధ్యయన కేంద్రం నుంచే పొందొచ్చు.
University teleconference. Today we discuss MA final year English literature lesson titled The Indian Novel in English, an Overview. We request the students to participate in the discussion. Please do call us on these numbers 040 270 31431, 040 270 31432, 040 270 31433. We invite eminent resource persons from English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad, Professor N. Ramadevi, Department of English and Indian and World Literatures, EFLU University, Dr. Anand Mahanan from the Department of English Materials Development, EFLU University, Hyderabad. We invite the resource person and we welcome you, sir and madam. Today's topic is the Indian novel in English, an overview. When we speak of Indian novel in English, it starts with pre-independence period. The great Indian trio Rashipuram Krishnaswamy Narayan, in short R.K. Narayan, Mulk Raj Anand and Raja Rao were prominent and eminent Indian writers in English. In 1920s and 30s, Indian novel reflected the nation and its identity, represented Indian cultures in its variety. The prominent themes were nationalism with patriotic flavor, and they discussed and focused on the problems of poverty, caste and class in the Indian society. This we can observe in the works of R.K. Narayan, Mulk Raj Anand and Raja Rao. R.K. Narayan speaks in his Malgudi Days and Swami and his friends lot of social related issues. In Mulk Raj Anand's Untouchable and Coolie, even the reflection of society is very clear. Raja Rao's Kantapura shows the national identity. When it comes to national identity and reflection, 1920s and 30s are very much relevant for the technique of social realism. Now, Dr. Anand, can you tell us briefly the dominant themes in Indian English novel?
Well, we can start with historical theme first. S.K. Ghosh's Prince of Destiny and S.K. Mitra's Hindipur, they depict historical events. Then after that we can think of national struggle for freedom as a theme, and for this we can take examples like Raja Rao's Kanthapura, Mulkraj Anand's The Sword and the Sickle, K. Abbas Inqilab, K. Nagarajan's Chronicle of Kedaram, R. K. Narayan's Waiting for Mahatma. Then we can move to Gandhi theme. Gandhi as a subject appears in most of the novels of this period, and for example, we can take R. K. Narayan's Waiting for the Mahatma, Swami and Friends, and Mulkraj Anand's Untouchable. Another prominent theme could be socio-economic conscience or social reality, and for this we could think of Bhavani Bhattacharya's So Many Hunger, Kamala Markandeya's Nectar in a Sieve. East-West encounter is another theme that is very prominent, and we find this in Ruth Pravar Jhabwala's Heat and Dust, Asman in India, and Anita Desai's Bye Bye Blackbird. The partition is another prominent theme, and we find this in Khushwant Singh's A Train to Pakistan, Chaman Lahal's Azadi, and Manohar Malgankar's A Bend in Ganges. Tradition and modernity also appears as a theme in this Indian English novel, and we find this in Bhavani Bhattacharya's Music for Mohini, Manohar Malgankar's The Princess, and so on. After that, we have many women writers depicting women issues. For example, Anita Desai's Voices in the City, Bye Bye Blackbird, Cry the Peacock, Kamala Markandeya's Two Virgins, Shashi Deshpande's That Long Silence. Then postmodernism is another prominent theme and also style, and the obvious example would be Salman Rushdie, Midnight Children, and Shashi Tharoor, The Great Indian Novel, Amitav Ghosh's Shadow Lines, The Glass Palace, Mukul Kesavan's Looking Through Glass, and so on. Then diaspora is also a theme of importance, and we find this theme in the novels of Royston Mistry, Bharati Mukherjee, and Meena Alexander. So, these are the prominent themes, but there are other themes also, they are not highlighted.
Yeah. Professor Rama, what is the contribution of women writers in Indian fiction?
Okay, the early women writers who have started writing around in the late 50s, I mean, like Kamala Markandeya, Ruth Pravar Jhabwala, and Shanta Rama Rao, they actually were concerned with themes related to the East-West encounter, which in a way depicted the conflict between tradition and modernity. And apart from this, some of these writers were also concerned with issues related to poverty and women's problems during the independence movement. And to all these novels which were written during this period by these women writers, they all have a backdrop of independence movement. So, it runs as some kind of an undercurrent to all these novels, but of all these writers, Nayanthara Saigal actually makes the best use of the Indian national movement, because in her novels the national movement and the struggle of an educated woman, they run side by side in most of her novels. So, Nayanthara Saigal in a way is concerned with the problems of educated women coming from an upper middle class society, unlike Kamala Markandeya. Kamala Markandeya is mostly concerned with women belonging to lower classes and the issues that are related to their livelihood mostly. And Kamala Markandeya also displays a kind of an awareness about social issues, such as she deals with in novels like Coffer Dams, where the construction of a dam is the central issue, and how that is going to affect the
Lives
life,
of women.
the lives of the people in a village, that is the setting.
Yeah.
So, this is, and Ruth Pravar Jabwala, she is mostly concerned with the east-west encounter, the impact of the western culture on the
Indian
scenario and Indian people.
Can I just intrude here? When you say about East-West conflict or tradition versus modernity, how the women writer depicts and what are the major works?
Jabwala's Heat and Dust is one of the most prominent novels, which is cited as an example in this regard. And in Nayanthara Sehgal's novels also this particular theme has been highlighted, and this actually leads to the most repeated theme in the Indian women's fiction, that is how a woman is expected to uphold the traditional values of Indian society. So, that actually led to the depiction of woman as a stereotype in most of the novels that were written during this period, that is woman as a silent victim as well as an upholder of traditional Indian values. So,
Yeah, I just want to add up with this. Is it only the flat characters that we see as a women, or is there any round characters that we see in the fiction? For example, when you say about tradition and upholding the tradition, is there any character which is very strong and search for their identity in this 1950s and 60s women fiction?
yeah, in Kamala Markandeya's novels, especially Two Virgins and Nectar in a Sieve, you have very strong women characters. In fact, in the novels of all these women novelists, the characters, the women protagonists are depicted as strong characters, but the plight is depicted more or less in the same manner. That is what matters actually.
Okay.
But after Anita Desai came onto the scene, it changed a little bit. That is, she started writing in the 1970s, and she brought a new aspect to Indian women's fiction. That is, for the first time, she started focusing on the inner world of her female protagonists. That is how the female psyche works.
Yeah, works. Okay.
In given situations.
How you find the difference between 1940s, 50s and 70s when you say about Anita Desai and the previous writers? Is there any major difference in both dealing with the theme and technique?
Actually, the initial writers, who started writing in the 50s and went on to write in the 60s and in the 70s as well, in their writings what you see is the theme is given more importance, but with Anita Desai you for the first time see experimenting with the novelistic technique. She actually makes use of stream of consciousness technique here and there, and her prose is also very refined. She uses very lyrical prose, especially in the novel, in her very first novel, Cry the Peacock. The language is very poetic. She reminds one of D.H. Lawrence's poetic prose in that novel, and the kind of metaphors and images that she creates in this novel also call for our attention. So, for the first time it was Anita Desai who started writing or giving importance to technique also and the refinement of language. And then we move on to the 90s, where we see a new breed of writers. That is, quite a lot of writers started writing during this period, and this period is also noted for the large scale migrations that happened from India to the western countries. And most of these women were highly educated and they were from affluent families, and they were very handsomely employed in the West. So, these women, when they started writing, the scenario it changed very radically. They started focusing on the problems of migration, the problems of diasporic communities and globalization. All these were the issues which they started discussing or exploring in their novels.
Yeah.
And it was actually Bharati Mukherjee who started writing about these issues in a different way.
Dr. Anand, when we speak about a new breed of writers emerged after independence, Bhavani Bhattacharya, Manohar Malgonkar, Kamala Markandeya, Anita Desai and Nayanthara Sehgal. In dealing with the dominant, other than the dominant themes, what are the other themes involved in Indian fiction?
Well, there are other themes like alienation that we find in Arun Jashi's novel. The theme of ecological concern that we find in Amitav Ghosh's Hungry Tide. Treatment of myth that we find in many of R.K. Narayan's novels. Then mysticism we find in Raja Rao's Serpent and the Rope. These are also themes dealt by these writers, but they are not highlighted much, but we cannot ignore them.
Yeah.
They have to be explored.
Some, as you say, like
Yeah,
that.
yes.
Yeah. How are our national events intertwined with the fiction?
As somebody said, fiction is a national allegory for certain context, for certain nations. This is very apt for India, because we find a lot of national events finding place in many of our novels. Take for example, the freedom struggle, partition, Quit India movement, emergency, all these national events we find in many of our novels. Freedom struggle dominates the early novels in India. Then Quit India movement 1942, that has been treated by Mukul Kesavan in his Looking Through Glass.
Yes.
Yes, and
partition also forms
by
the basis.
Khushwant Singh, Return to Pakistan.
Yes.
So, all these are intertwined with our fictional writing, and they are present in our novel.
What is a fiction? What is this partition? How partition played a very dominant role in Indian fiction, Professor Rama?
Partition is taken as a backdrop to many of the novels, right from the 50s. That is, once the partition happened, it started providing a kind of a basis to many of the novels which were written by Malgonkar, and even in the recent times some of the Pakistani writers like Bapsi Sidhwa and Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children, these novels are also based on partition, and this is a historical event actually, but this historical event has been treated differently by different writers. In fact, Rushdie treats it as in a very playful kind of a manner, where history comes to change its meanings.
Can I add up to that when we say, when they look back, or is there any nostalgic feeling after the partition, whatever the writers, whatever their fiction, is there any nostalgic feeling or reflection of nostalgic feelings in these writings?
In partition?
Yes, partition novels.
Yeah, it must be so, because partition novels are written by those writers who had been a direct witness to that particular historical event. So, in one way or the other, they must have been, or their people must have been affected by this partition.
Yes. Dr. Anand, how is this Indian English novel markedly different from the Indian novel in translation?
Yes, Indian English novel and Indian novel in Indian languages or in translation, they treat or they deal with Indian sensibility. In that sense, they are common, they deal with Indian sensibility. So, there is no major difference, but there are many differences if we consider certain aspects. For example, when a novelist writes in their first language, in
Yes,
their
yeah.
first language, mother tongue, they have a particular audience in mind, a particular specific audience in mind, and they write for that audience, and the treatment of the theme will be different.
Yes.
Whereas, an Indian English novelist writing in English for a global audience. So, the treatment of theme and style, all that will be different. So, both are rooted in our cultural milieu, but audience in a particularly in a globalized scenario, treatment of theme, these aspects will vary, yeah, and they are different.
Different in
Yeah.
that way. Professor Rama, what do you think when it comes to translation works in from English to any other vernacular language? How it differs from one place to the other, or from one writer to the another writer?
Can you put it in a different way?
If women writers who write in the vernacular language and in translation, how it differs?
Thematically there may not be much difference, but it is in the treatment of the themes that there is a slight difference, the way they treat, because the writers who write in English, they are to some extent influenced by the Western writers, though so the stylistic devices are in a way different from the ones employed by the regional writers. And in the regional writings, actually the themes are more closely related to the people of that particular
Society,
region, very specific, region specific, whereas the writings by the Indian English writers are somewhat universal in appeal.
When it comes to we speak about identity, what is this diasporic identity, Professor Rama?
So, diasporic identity is, to put it simply, it is the socio-cultural baggage which a migrant carries with her or him to the foreign land he travels to. So, it is actually to say that, to be more explicit, the migrated people, they find in their own culture a kind of a defensive mechanism to fight against a sense of alienation or a sense of rootlessness that they experience once they land in the foreign land.
We got a call, sorry for introduction. Yes. Hello. Yes, please. Good afternoon. Can you please introduce yourself?
My name is Sriram Reddy.
Yes, Mr. Sriram Reddy.
I am leading your program.
Yes.
Yes, program is trying to get very good. I would like to remind you the role of Sarojini Naidu before we did independence and after independence, writing and everything. Please enlighten to us.
Sure, Mr. Reddy. Yes, sure, Mr. Reddy. Here we are speaking about Indian women writing, Indian fiction, not poetry, Indian poetry. But still we can request our resource person to throw little light on Sarojini Naidu also. Any one of you, sir?
Yes, she is an interesting poet. What I like about Sarojini Naidu is that she deals with common people like Bengal sellers, palanquin bearers, Coromandel fishers, and common places, common spaces. And she writes in a very musical, rhythmic way, very poetic sense we find in her writing. That is why perhaps she was called the Nightingale of India.
Yeah.
And she uses a lot of folk elements in her poems, very musical appeal we get.
Yeah. Professor Rama Devi, can you want to add up little more for Sarojini Naidu poetry?
So, I will only be repeating what he has said, that is Sarojini Naidu's poetry is known for its simplicity and down to earth themes, and she usually deals with people whom we see every day in our lives, and that is why it is very difficult to identify ourselves with the characters
Yes.
that she depicts in her poems. And actually what appeals to us the most about her poetry is the musical quality and the lucidity of language.
Yes. So, Mr. Reddy, I think there is an answer from our side. The Sarojini Naidu's poetry is simple and lucid. But I am extremely sorry to say that we are discussing about Indian fiction in English. Let us come back to our point about diaspora and diasporic identity. Professor Ramadevi, let us continue the topic.
So, I was referring to this, that is diasporic identity is the socio-cultural baggage which a migrant usually carries with him or her to the foreign land he travels to, and this is very important for him initially, because it is with the help of this he manages to come to terms with the sense of loneliness, sense of fruitlessness and sense of loss that he happens to experience when he is in a foreign land. So, that is why he sticks to this particular identity of home and land, and this actually leads to the formation of diasporic identity or ethnic identity of the diasporic community. So, for the first generation migrants, this diasporic identity is very important, and this sometimes creates or likely to create an alienation or sense of nostalgia of the past and rootlessness in the first generation migrants as they cling to this particular aspects of culture, cultural moorings, beliefs and practices of homeland that often lead to a conscious or an inadvertent resistance to accepting the
Present
host
culture.
culture.
Yeah, host culture.
So, there will be a kind of resistance on part of the immigrant in the foreign land, and this sometimes leads to what Homi Bhabha calls the double consciousness and also unhomeliness. So, these are the phrases or terms that you come across in Homi Bhabha's The Location of Culture.
This so far. When we speak about rootlessness, alienation and sense of nostalgic feeling, why this double consciousness or unhomeliness appears only in diasporic writing?
That is because the diasporic, as we have already seen, it is the diasporic community which actually is unable to detach itself or de-link itself completely from the home culture. That is the first generation diasporic community.
Okay.
So, they continue to find some kind of comfort by aligning themselves to their home. So, that is what creates this double consciousness, but physically they are in the foreign land to which they need to relate themselves.
Yes.
So, that leads to a kind of a clash of cultures
More like
between the home culture and the host
host
culture. But this is more intensely experienced by the second generation immigrants. Because the parents, they never allow them to detach completely from the host culture to which they had not been exposed directly, I mean home culture.
Yeah.
It is through the parents that these second generation immigrants have been introduced or exposed to the home culture.
Yeah. Coming to this, what is the plight of the second generation immigrants? What are the issues that they face?
So, as I said just now, the second generation immigrants are often tossed between two different cultures, the home culture and the host culture, and this particular theme has been very beautifully explored by Meera Syal in her novel Anita and Me. This is actually a novel where you have a child protagonist, Meera, that is her name, and this novel, the entire novel comes from the point of view of this girl.
Child.
She is actually in her 8th or 9th year, who finds it very difficult to find a strong foothold in England. It is in actually a rural place in London, where her father works in a coal mine. It is a Punjabi family actually, but this girl, she joins an English school in England, and how she faces the peer pressure in the school, and how she has to satisfy her Punjabi mother when she comes home, Punjabi mother and grandmother. So, this girl is torn between both the cultures. On the one hand, she is expected to satisfy her peers at school, and on the other hand, she is supposed to go by the
Yeah.
family values.
Yeah.
So, that is very beautifully done by this particular writer, and this novel has also been filmed. You have a film version also. And another novelist who deals with this issue is Jhumpa Lahiri in the recent times, in her namesake. There you have a second generation immigrant in the male protagonist in that novel. You have two generations depicted in this novel. The first generation is represented by Ashima, the mother, and how she finds it comparatively easier to get going in the US setting.
Settings.
And her own son, he finds it very difficult in the beginning. She has one daughter and one son. While her son finds it very difficult, his name is Gogol, and he finds it very difficult to meet the expectations of both the host culture and the home culture. Whereas his sister, she finds it comparatively easier to balance
Both of
both.
them. Yes.
So, here we have a depiction of both sides of it.
Yes. So there
Because
is a
the
conflict.
girl actually is represents the hybrid culture. She is receptive to both the cultures without any problem. So, that seems to be the ideal of the second generation people nowadays.
Immigrants.
That is what has prompted them to come up with the slogan, think globally and live locally, giving way to the term glocal,
Yes.
the ideal.
So, coming to home culture, the clash between the home culture and host culture, let us come back to the Indian English novel, how it took a different turn when Salman Rushdie entered with Midnight Children. Dr. Anand, can you elaborate about this?
Yes, with the emergence of Rushdie, the Indian English novel took a different shape, different turn, because he has changed the style of narration and treatment of theme in his novel, particularly in Midnight Children, that was published in 1981.
What
He
are the-
has adopted this postmodern trend and magic realism in his novel.
what are the strategies used by Salman Rushdie in Midnight Children?
Well, what Rushdie has done is attacking the grand narrative, or as the postmodern trend does, it attacks or destabilizes the grand narrative. The grand narrative is Indian history, and he juxtaposes Indian history with individual history. So, in a way he makes, in a comic way he treats very serious subjects, and by depicting the history of a Parsi family, he is telling history from another perspective.
What is the role of magic realism in Midnight Children?
Magic realism is a trend, or you can call it a genre also, to treat reality in a very comic way, and fantasy and reality, they are combined. History and local history, individual history, they are combined, and there is also combination of genres, and impossible things will be happening in a novel.
Novel.
Yeah.
So, the chief aim actually of Rushdie in this in writing this novel is to dismantle the, as he said, to dismantle the grand narrative of Indian history and to come up with many petite narratives or minor narratives or micro narratives as it is called, narrated by or representing unknown and silent people. So, throughout the novel you see Rushdie trying to bring in many mutant histories. In the sense, mutant histories means histories
Silent.
which had never been
Narrated.
heard before. So, all these little or unimportant narratives find place in this novel.
How it becomes rich with that, as you said, mutant and very silent characters, how it differs with history?
So, history actually the one another important question that Rushdie seems to be dealing with indirectly in this novel is whether history and fiction are one and the same. Can they take each other's place? This seems to be another important issue. So, here what Rushdie does is he tries to dismantle history, the validity of the historical discourse.
Yes. Destabilizes the
And
history.
this he does by deliberately giving wrong dates or like that. He messes up with history. For example, the date on which Mahatma Gandhiji was assassinated, it is wrongly given. So, that is one of the glaring factual errors that he deliberately introduces in the novel. So, according to Rushdie, as is the case with Collingwood and Foucault, history is always personal. It cannot be a discourse and representative also. So, history is personal. So, the versions, there will be many versions for the same historical event. It depends on the individual at that point of time. That moment, how he had experienced it.
Yes. Dr. Anand, who are the novelists after Rushdie who wrote in similar lines with Salman Rushdie?
Well, there are many. We have Shashi Tharoor, Mukul Kesavan, Amitav Ghosh, Upamanyu Chatterjee, and and some others.
How do you compare these writers, post-colonial writers or post-modern writers, to the earlier writers?
Earlier writers looked at India and Indian history very seriously, and that was the need of the hour also. And local histories, individual histories, they were submerged in this great Indian freedom struggle and treatment of history and all that.
Because
So
nationality, national identity.
Yeah,
and
that was the question. That
yes,
was important that
yes.
time. But these postmodernist writers are treating local histories, individual history, as Madam pointed out, that they have a different view of history also. History is seen traditionally as archival history and archival facts, based on archival facts, but according to postmodern writers, they feel that even history is written by one person. It is a narrative. And so fiction can be also a narrative, and fiction can be also history. So they are telling history, highlighting history in different form from another perspective.
Yes. How do you estimate the contemporary Indian fiction English novel? Yes, I will take the call. There is a call for us. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Can I talk to the panel?
Yes, please.
Ma'am, Ma'am, good morning.
Good morning. Can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, I have a question for the gentleman who is on the panel.
Yes, please go on.
And right now I'm working on narratology, which is very close to narrative technique. I'm right now working on narratology, which is very close to narrative technique.
Okay.
Can you just ask the panel and the gentleman to define exactly the precise difference between narratology and narrative technique? And I would also be very happy if you could suggest me the right books where I can learn more about narratology and narrative technique.
Yes. So what?
That's my question.
That's okay. Fine. Fine. Thank you. This is about narratology and narrative technique. Any of you? He's speaking about what is the difference between narratology and narrative technique. You can take the question. Yes.
The narratology is the scientific study of narration.
Yes. And he speaks, is there any difference between narrative technique and narratology?
Narrative technique is one of the devices that is used to write a novel.
Yes. So, let us come back to the point. How do you place Rohinton Mystery's novel in the context of Indian English novel?
Yes,
That
Rohinton Mystery writes about local history.
Okay.
As we see in Fine Balance, that is the story of a Parsi woman, Dina Mehta, and Dina Dala Manek, and two tailors from Dalit communities, Om Prakash and another person. And so how the Indian politics is responsible for that debacle.
That's first.
Yeah.
How does he relates his novel to history? Rohinton Mystery relates the novel to history, and can novel be an alternative to history?
Well, Mystery deals with the emergency, the historical phase, emergency, and how that is responsible for killing democracy, how that is responsible for killing people's dream, and promises are made about this is our city, this is your city, keep your city green, and all this awareness. The ownership is given to citizens, but in actual sense they are deprived of their rights. So, he has presented this this political situation in a very interesting way in his novel.
Can novel be alternative to history? That's what we are speaking about, whether it can be an alternative to the history, novel, fiction.
It cannot be an alternative to history, but it is also history. It is also another mode of narrating events and telling story. We cannot ignore that.
How do you look Indian novel in a pedagogic point of view?
Well, now Indian English novel has established itself as a major or recognized genre, and it has been prescribed in university syllabus, and it has been taught. Our Indian English writers have been doing well, and they have been winning many awards, and they have been writing quite well, widely recognized. So, it has a bright future, and it has a lot of potentials. From pedagogic point of view also, it has a lot of potentials.
Yes. When we are speaking about the awards and the people writing from different places, and we now consider ourselves as a global writers, what is the role of a publisher for an Indian writer? Role of a publisher, anyone can take the question. Is publishing or publisher plays a prominent role in presenting one's novel or one's fiction, especially Indian writers?
Yes, a writer is enthusiastic, they have a theme, they have a subject to write and bring before the audience. So also the publisher should be enthusiastic, they should invite good quality writing, they should promote them and all that. And it is a good sign that we have many publishers nowadays. Earlier writers tried very hard to publish, and with lot of difficulties they could publish. Now that we have a good spread of publishers, and there are a lot of choices, and they also have missions and visions. So, they collaborate with writers.
So, we can expect a future ahead with lot of Indian writers to be getting or getting many awards. Professor Rama, can you please tell us about recent women writers, their impact in Indian culture and their contributions to the Indian English novel?
So, if you look at the recent writings of Indian women writers, you can clearly see a kind of change or shift or a much desired kind of a restraint from depicting woman as a passive and silent victim, as was the case with the initial writings of Indian women writers. And now you see many of these writers depicting women as self-reliant and also not as stereotypes. Stereotypes in the sense they happen to be tackling with issues and problems which are quite contemporary and which are not stereotypical. And here we also see these characters, that is women protagonists, trying to make a space for themselves in the domestic relationships. That was never the case with the earlier works. There we have seen women characters always struggling to find some kind of role within the family setup, that is the traditional family setup. But now we find many women characters in these novels trying to make a space
for themselves,
yes, catering to their needs as educated and employed women. So, this is a very welcome change, and most of these characters are also representatives of the urban middle class, working class women. So, they are also depicting issues and problems that are quite relevant to the present times. That is another welcome change. And we can also see another thing, that is writers like Shashi Deshpande, Shobha De, Arundhati Roy, Geeta Hariharan, all these writers, they have enriched English language to a very large extent, especially Arundhati Roy in her God of Small Things. She has innovated many fresh coinages in her novel, and the way she treats some of these themes is also quite novel and innovative. And there is another writer, Manju Kapoor, who has also displayed a very mature understanding of the female psyche, and she always tends to blend the external and the personal aspects of these women protagonists' lives. That is also another new thing that is happening to the Indian women's fiction in the present times. And Manju Kapoor is actually, she has gone to the extent of depicting gay and lesbian relationships also in her novels, which no longer are considered as fanciful things. So, this is really a daring step on her part. And leaving these writers aside, we have a bunch of diasporic writers who have been dealing with issues related to globalization and cosmopolitanism, etc.
I just want to add up here. Which writer do you think is a trend setter especially in this regard when it comes to second immigrants or diaspora writing?
So, I think we can give credit to Kamala Markandeya in this regard, because she was the first
Is there any
writer.
specific reason for that?
Yeah, she was the first writer to have written about the immigrants' plight in her very early novel, The Nowhere Man. So, there the very title itself very clearly is suggestive of the double consciousness about which I had earlier been referring to. So, double consciousness, because this nowhere is also referring to the in-betweenness that the second generation immigrants usually experience in these foreign lands. That is, I had referred to the fact that the second generation immigrants often find it very difficult to identify themselves either with the host culture or with the home culture, and sometimes they identify themselves with both. That is something desirable, but if they are unable to identify or satisfy either of these two cultures, they will be living on the boundaries all the time. Marginalized. That is always feeling a sense
Alienated.
of being left out.
Yes.
So, that is all these things were discussed in a different way by Markandeya in her Nowhere Man. The protagonist Srinivas, who is actually forcefully sent to London by his own father, who is a freedom fighter during the national movement days, in order to escape the harassment from the British officials. And that is the irony, in order to escape from the harassment of the British officials, he is sent to their own land, that is England.
Yes, yeah.
So, he spends as many as 30 years there, but at the end of these 30 years, he is still unable to claim himself as an Englishman, because the people in the neighborhood, they always ask him to get out of the place, you go back to your country. But he is unable to come back to India because he had lost touch with it 30 years
Is a long
ago.
tenure. Yeah.
So, he ends up as a nowhere man.
Yeah.
So, the immigrant dilemmas and problems are very beautifully and very authentically dealt with by Markandeya in this novel in the 50s itself.
Yes.
So,
Early
that is why
stages,
you can easily give the credit
as a
to
trendsetter for
Markandeya.
this. Dr. Anand, how do you see the recent writers, men, it's not about women writers, Salman Rushdie, Vikram Seth and other very prominent writers are different from women writers? Is there the themes are different when you said about environment, alienation, rootlessness? This is all reflected in some of a very prominent role in Salman Rushdie and Vikram Seth, even Amitav Ghosh. Do you find a difference in these writers? How the difference? I mean, if you can elaborate.
They are different in the sense they are more sensitive to the contemporary issues, women issues, environment and so on. And they are I feel they are interdisciplinary also in their treatment of themes. For example, Amitav Ghosh takes a lot of materials from anthropology, folklore and so on. Then history we have already discussed in the case of Salman Rushdie and Mukul Kesavan and all.
Treatment of history,
yeah,
treatment
yeah,
of history in different
yeah.
changes.
So,
yeah.
they are more sensitive to ecological concerns, women problem and local issues our nation encounters.
Yes. When it comes,
And one more point,
yes,
their English is quite different. If you compare the English language and the style is also quite different if you compare with the early writers.
what is the reason for difference in the style?
Well, they are exposed to Firstly, they are educated in English. Okay, they have good exposure to English. They have traveled
A lot.
A lot.
Yeah. Right now, I thought with one last question, which Professor Rama will wind up the things.
Yeah.
What kind of future do you envisage for Indian English fiction?
Yeah, I think the scene is quite bright right now. I will confine my response only to Indian women writers, because I have been reading some of the recently published novels in this area, and writers like Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni, etc., Jhumpa Lahiri, these writers, the new breed of writers, they display a very great promise with regard to technique and other kinds of issues related to fiction writing, because Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni has also been making use of magic realism as one of her technical devices, and another writer, Vandana Singh, who has recently published a novel called Young Uncle Comes Home. It comes under the genre of speculative fiction.
Yes.
So, an area which has hitherto been untouched by women novelists in Indian fiction.
Thank you, Professor Rama and Dr. Anand Mahanan, for the wonderful inputs, and we are very thankful for the resource persons.